I'm Matt Gibb of the Strategic Operations Management Association, which is one of today's event co-sponsors. It's my pleasure today to introduce Bryan Stockton, the Chairman and CEO of Mattel. As CEO, Mr. Stockton has advocated a distinct focus on growth while maintaining strong financial performance. He has articulated a four-part plan for long-term growth, which includes new strategies for planning, structure, employee development, and cultural fit. He has a history of accomplishing strong growth, having achieved 7 years of increasing sales while leading Mattel's international business. Mr. Stockton joined Mattel in 2000 after holding several leadership positions in the packaged food industry. His responsibilities at Mattel initially included business planning and development, including mergers and acquisitions, and grew to include the whole of the international business. Now, as befits the CEO of the world's largest toy company, Mr. Stockton also enjoys playing. I know that because as an intern at Mattel last summer, I got to see him sit in with the company band on guitar. He also took some time on another occasion with the interns to speak with us and share his insights about functional management issues, kind of down at our level, and also leadership and business strategy. And so from these experiences, I know that each of us has a lot to learn from Mr. Stockton today, and it's very fortunate for us to have him joining us. So please join me now in welcoming Bryan Stockton.
Good day, everyone. Before I begin my remarks today, I want to start by thanking Dean Olian and the faculty and students for inviting me here today to share some time with you. And Matt, thank you very much for that very lovely introduction. I'm really looking forward to my continued engagement here at the university. I recently assumed a role as one of the board of visitors for the Anderson School, and I'm thrilled about that. And I'm delighted today to be able to share a little bit about my background, a little bit about how I view the world and myself, and share some of the things in my career with you that I hope you'll find helpful and provide you with some insights about your future. In 2012, I had the distinct privilege of becoming Mattel's 6th Chief Executive Officer in 67 years of the company's very rich history. And this month, I assumed the role of the Chairman of our Board of Directors. But before I start, I thought I would give you just a few fast facts about Mattel. We are, in fact, the world's largest toy company. We sell about 1 billion toys a year. And while we're headquartered just down the 405 in El Segundo, we sell those billion toys in over 150 countries. We have offices all over the world. Very important to us, we boast what we think is the very best portfolio of brands in the toy business. We think that we're the envy of the industry. Our top 5 brands are brands that I'm sure you all have played with at some point in time in your life: Barbie, Hot Wheels, Fisher-Price, American Girl, Thomas & Friends. And in fact, if you look at those 5 properties there, they were 5 of the top 10 properties in the toy industry in 2012. In fact, when you look at our proven leadership in brand management, leading brands, whether it's a 50-year-old icon like Barbie or a new up-and-comer like Monster High, when you look at that and combine it with our global reach, it makes us the strategic partner of choice for anyone who owns toyetic intellectual property. And when we look at toyetic intellectual properties, we're talking about partnering with brands like Cars, Disney Princess, Toy Story, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Batman, WWE, and Dora the Explorer. These are properties that are continually available at retail and we think help us build strong brands. It's interesting, and you might find this surprising. You don't just wake up one day and find yourself to be the CEO of the world's largest toy company. Throughout my career, I've come to appreciate the importance of identifying opportunities for growth and taking professional risks. These risks serve as stepping stones to more senior leadership positions throughout my career and business growth opportunities, which have ultimately led to my current position here at Mattel. When I think of risks and the opportunities that I've experienced, I'm often reminded of what I call the English saying, mind the gap. If you've been to London and you've used the subway system there or the tube, You've seen that sign posted everywhere. It's one of those special English sayings that Americans love because it sounds a lot more elegant than watch your step. For some, it's a warning sign, a potential danger between you and your destination. But for me, in my world, the gap represents the next step to successfully leading the businesses I'm responsible for. So I find that I am constantly minding the gap. So let me make this a little bit more concrete by giving you an example. I think I'll take all of you to London with me right now. I think Dean Olian won't mind that. I'm in the mood for some great chicken tikka masala, some steaming hot naan bread, and an ice-cold Kingfisher beer. Maybe not in that order. We might start with the ice-cold Kingfisher beer. And there's a great place that I love in Russell Square called Salam Namaste. And we have to take the Piccadilly line on the tube to get there. So let's imagine ourselves at the station. We're waiting on the platform at King's Cross. Now, why King's Cross? Well, our daughter used to live there, so that's where we're starting from. We think that minding the gap is really this physical thing between us and getting on the tube. Literally that space between the platform and the train. But I think if you think of this situation differently, it's really about redirecting tensions in this specific situation. As we wait on the platform for the tube, I personally have a significant amount of tension. Am I on the right line? Am I on the right side of the track to go the right direction? And I hope I have enough money on my Oyster card to get through the turnstiles when we finally get there. I check my mobile to make sure I have the right address for the Salam Namaste. And most importantly, I hope the food is as good as I remember so I don't disappoint my 350 guests here with me today. That's very important. However, when you think about all that tension that's building inside me right now, it's static. It's not going anywhere. It's not really helping me progress to my real goal, which is to get us all to a great Indian dinner so that we can begin to build a better relationship and become a better team. So now the tube pulls up, the doors open up, and my thoughts can now shift to dinner. I know I'm on the right train, I'm headed in the right direction, and I'm thinking about how I can make sure everybody has a great time. Some of us love football, so we can talk about Premier League football. Other of us may want to talk about the royal baby, and we can talk about that and have a good time. But the most important thing is my tensions have shifted from impediments to progress to actually focusing on what we want to do, which is to build the team. That's going from static tension to more positive or directed tension. That's the kind of tension I like. So our trip to Russell Square shows you that minding the gap or crossing the gap is really about shifting those tensions. Static tension has energy but no forward momentum. It can really prove to be frustrating because it never really leads to results. That was the tension I felt on the platform. Directed tension really reflects the natural energy of the situation and helps you move forward, helps you achieve a successful conclusion so that the business and you can take that step forward to accomplish your goals. And that's the tension that I was feeling when we were all together on the tube. That's the kind of tension that I look for in any business situation. I don't want to sit still and stir. I want to move forward and shift the tension points. Now, this concept of redirecting tension or overcoming these gaps, that they exist all the time in and around businesses, has really been useful for me in my early days as a sales and marketing person at Kraft, or later in my career in assignments in strategic planning or division management, and particularly now in my current assignment as the CEO of Mattel. In fact, in my role, I really need to work hard to make sure that we identify and we fill these gaps in a timely way. Because if we do this successfully, we will in fact grow and will prosper and will fulfill the vision that we have of creating the future of play. So let me give you just a few examples of how I think about these tension points and gaps in our business at Mattel. I'm going to start first with the concept of market tensions and the gaps they create. Now, we have experienced this in our Barbie brand business over the past few years. Historically, girls' play patterns were pretty clear. In fact, you could lump them into things like fashion doll play, where girls can tell stories through a fashion doll. Creative play, like traditional arts and crafts kind of toys. Nurturing play, which occurs with large baby dolls. Or friendship play, as we see with our American Girl dolls. Historically, these segments have lived in a nice sort of cozy arrangement over time, and girls sort of neatly fit into this. The problem is that the segmentation began to blur a few years ago, and what caused that blur was digital technology. Digital technology was enabling girls to create digitized art, take photos of all their collections or their treasures or their best friends with an inexpensive phone or an inexpensive camera or mobile phone. Our girls team saw this market segmentation, and they saw this tension shifting directions. It was no longer this nice, neat, linear thing. It began to shift and become a little more amorphous. Well, this recognition, and they got this through lots of insights and research, inspired us to create one of our key Barbie successes in 2012, something called Photo Fashion Barbie. This is a Barbie doll that had a small digital camera inside the body. The lens was the jewel in Barbie's necklace, but that really wasn't the innovation. The innovation behind this doll, and the real game changer, was putting a screen underneath Barbie's shirt. And that screen would display the images that the girl took with the picture. So now she can show pictures of her friends, or pets, or projects, all sorts of things. And it really was special because she can now combine doll play and art play. And as we all know, she can change. Sometimes girls change their best friends. As the father of two daughters, I know that BFFs can change frequently. Sometimes on a daily basis, but if Susie is no longer my BFF, I can take a picture of Nancy, and Nancy's my BFF, and I can trash Susie. But that's the fun of this, because it's creative, and it really brings the intersection of creative play and fashion doll play together. And bringing this together really saw the gap, filled the gap, and as a result, it was one of our best-selling products in the Barbie line for 2012. A second example of a market gap, it can be seen in how we approached Rovio's Angry Birds and how we licensed it into our line. As many of you know, Angry Birds is a success by any measure. I'm sure many of you have Angry Birds on your phone. I'm looking closely. I only see about 3 people playing it right now. That's encouraging to me as the speaker. But early on, as we thought about Angry Birds, and a lot of people thought about Angry Birds, people thought it was a threat to traditional toy play, and particularly game play. But as we saw this brand begin to grow, and people talk about it more, and saw some of the social chat about it, our games group thought that they were believing the tension points were changing. This wasn't just an app and a game. They truly believed that this was growing into a brand. And in fact, not just a brand, a unique kind of brand, an entertainment kind of brand, just like a movie property or a popular television show. So they were convinced that Angry Birds could truly live outside that iPad or your iPhone, and they were correct. They created an analog plastic version of the game, and I have to tell you, to be perfectly honest, half the company thought they were nuts, half the company thought they were brilliant. I was right in the middle. But it was very controversial. But the great thing is it was a huge success because this team sensed the gap and they filled it. And as a result, when you look at the revenues that we generate off the sale of a plastic game, it rivals the sales of what Rovio gets in terms of downloads, the revenue off their downloads. It's pretty spectacular. It's a plastic toy. But it thought about this as a brand, not just an app. The second kind of gap that I think about a lot is a process gap, and I really view this as a straightforward kind of thing. In this area, a gap exists, or I see the gap, when I see that decisions are not being made, or they're not being made on a timely basis because there's a lack of an understanding of the problem that has to be solved, or an inability for the process just to get to a logical conclusion. So let me give you an example that I personally experienced in 2007. And in that year, Mattel unfortunately had to recall $22 million toys for either using paint that had lead levels in excess of what was allowed, or for magnets that become liberated from the toy. And I know that Bob Eckert will be teaching a class in special situations here, I think it's next semester. And he can tell you a lot more about it. But from my standpoint, it was probably one of the most challenging times in my 12-year history at Mattel. Perhaps one of the most challenging times in the history of Mattel, period. Fortunately for us, the company then led by Bob as the CEO and chair really focused us all on making sure we got the right information We're trying to make the right decisions for the long-term relationship that we have with our consumers, our retailers, and a whole host of government organizations around the world that we needed to work with. Everything was set up to succeed. However, I started to sense an unease with Bob in terms of how he was feeling about how decisions were getting made. Now, I wasn't a part of the original group that was brought together to solve this situation. But Bob asked me to join the team and provide my international expertise to what was going on. What I found in this whole process was a team of very dedicated people, people who were working night and day, weekends like I've never seen people work before, very long hours, working hard to get the facts, and they wanted to do the right thing for the company and for our consumers. But in this case, what I saw is tension points in the wrong place. In fact, the process was making it difficult for us to reach decisions and put together plans that we could execute across our business units. What the tension points were missing was an operating perspective. And that was my job, to bring an operating perspective to the process. We needed that because while Bob provided the overall leadership on this, we had to get decisions made and a plan made. So these static tension points that I was describing, functional, between the CEO and the team, were really not helping us create a plan and successfully execute. So in getting engaged with it, I tried to get those points shifted, and it seemed to work, and it had to work. And it had to work for some very simple reasons. This was a high-risk, high-visibility situation for the company. If it didn't go well, it certainly wouldn't reflect well on Mattel. It certainly wouldn't reflect well on Bob Eckert. It certainly wouldn't reflect well on me and everyone else who was involved in the project. So in the end, we very successfully met the challenge, and it all worked out well. Our prompt and open communication with consumers actually led to that Christmas being one of the best Christmases we had in history, because we were forthright with our communication, and we told the truth about what we did, and we put a plan in place that really solved the problem. So that was a process gap. Things weren't coming together. The third gap that I've seen is a gap that's created by the human element. What I call it is basically finding the right people to lead and create change that could result in filling a market gap or process gap. My best example of this is also, quite frankly, my most recent example of this. About 2 years ago, I made a decision to fill a process gap that we had in our North American business by forming a North American division for Mattel. To make a very long story short, Mattel ran its North American business functionally. In fact, just as Ruth and Elliot Handler had run it 60 years ago. But time had passed that model. We needed to change not only how we were making decisions, but we needed to change the decisions that we were making. We weren't making the right types of decisions. It was not a broadly popular decision, for the simple reason that we were asking a large part of the organization to make significant changes in how they operated. After putting a structure and process in place, it became clear that we had a gap in the human element. We needed to create the positive tension, not the static tension, but the positive tension to affect the overall change that we aspired to. I knew I had to make a change. I decided I needed to ask someone who I had worked with very closely in my international experience to lead this new division and make sure that we made all these process changes that were really important to us. It was a risky decision, but what was really interesting to me were the comments I heard as we were making this decision. By the way, this person's name is Jean-Christophe Péan. He is definitely French. And the comments were things like, well, he is an American. He doesn't understand the U.S. toy market. How could he make decisions? He's French. Mon Dieu. And he doesn't know how Americans think. How can he help us? And this one kind of got to me. He's only worked in international. How could he run the U.S.? And one of my very favorites, he's French. His accent is heavy. How can anyone understand him? Well, my response to that one was pretty clear, which is, well, he ran the UK, and they would claim the Americans don't speak English, and he succeeded there. Then we sent him to Asia, and he was based in Hong Kong, and he did very well there, where English is a second language. I didn't see a problem. Then the last one, which I thought was kind of cute, he doesn't know the customers. They're really tough. How can he deal with it? Well, one of the things that I learned in international is you can use your language to your benefit. And when saying no to a customer, when you say no, it sounds a little less aggressive than when we say no way. So his accent actually turned out to be an asset for him. And that's what I liked. Well, here's what I can tell you. I knew he wasn't American. I knew he didn't know the U.S. market or the customers. I knew his accent was heavy, but what I knew is he was a very strong leader. And he's performed exceptionally in every assignment we've ever asked him to take on, in different markets and different business challenges. And more importantly, to think about this human gap. I knew we wouldn't come into the job with typical American biases about customers and situations. In short, he was a why not person as opposed to, we've already done that before person. That was what we needed. So as a result of this change and his new role, the organization is really exceeding my expectations in terms of the change they've gone through in their performance. And I know there's a lot of great things ahead for this group. So I've talked a little bit about gaps. A lot of times they are not very apparent, particularly when it has to do with you and your career. Sometimes you don't see it, and if you don't see it, you might miss an opportunity. Earlier in my career at Kraft, I took a job that I refer to as my disappear period job. I took a position as the vice president. This is a long list. Vice president of new products, government relations, operations strategy, new product development, consumer affairs. The title says it all. It was a hodgepodge and a potpourri of stuff that was okay. And in fact, what was really challenging for me personally is a lot of people thought I went off track. Oh, poor Bryan. He must have screwed up. So I disappeared for a while, and what happened really in the end is my colleagues just didn't see the gap that I saw in this job. My job in this goofy job was to create a new process, again, shifting the tension points in the process because we needed to make investments in capacity, and those investment decisions had to cross brands and they had to cross functions, and we were not able to do that. And we desperately needed to do that because the food industry is very capital intensive. So if you make a wrong decision, it can cost you hundreds of millions of dollars. So taking that new position for me was undoubtedly a risk, and most people didn't see it as an opportunity. And in that new role, I ended up taking on one of the largest capital projects ever in Kraft history, and it paid off. So again, just because you don't see the gap doesn't mean it's there, and you need to capture it, because those are the kind of opportunities in your career that take you off the beaten path, that can separate you from the herd. So throughout my career, I found various types of gaps, but the three that I spend most of my time on are market, process, and human gaps, and each of these create challenges and opportunities every single day at Mattel. In fact, all throughout my career. So as I look forward and I look at managing and leading Mattel in the future, I know we have to recognize these gaps and challenges. In fact, we have to find them and we have to fill them. Whether they're gaps in our market, gaps in our processes, gaps in our people. And we have to do that because our challenge is to create higher, sustained growth rates while we maintain our strong financial discipline. We have to do that if we're going to create the future of play. So every day, I'm minding the gap. Every day, I am asking everyone in the company to mind the gap. Because we have to find new ways for kids to play. We have to find new stories to tell and new ways to market all of our Mattel brands all around the world to become a success. So those are some of the brief lessons that I've learned in my blank years of service to the consumer products industry. You can Google that and figure it out for yourself. But ultimately, my belief is my job is to find and fill gaps. And if I do that, we'll become a success. So with that, I think I'd like to invite Dean Olian to come on stage and we'll answer a few questions. Thank you.
That was very illuminating, and I'll remember those three gaps: market, process, people.
People, yes.
Yeah. Before I begin, I first want to thank Bryan and Mattel for the long years of friendship that we've had with the company. They have been really vacuuming in talent from our MBA program. We're really thrilled about that. In fact, Matt, thanks for the introduction, you're lucky. He's coming to Mattel permanently.
Good man, great choice.
After the internship. And quite a number of others this year. We're very appreciative. Bryan's predecessor, Bob Eckert, who was also a long-term member of our board, is now going to teach a crisis management course for 5 weeks. So look for that. And there's probably no other company that's been quite as tested, or Bob as the CEO, quite as tested as Mattel. And I want to thank some of our Board of Visitors members who are here today. The structure will be that I'll ask a few questions. I'm very mindful of the fact that you have class, and then there are microphones here that we'll turn to. I'm asking some questions that you have given us, and I'll frequently mention a name, or that our faculty have given us, or that I've also thought of. So this is a blend of everyone's questions, and then we'll turn to you. Let me introduce one more Bruin here, and that's Bryan's wife, Maureen, who is a Bruin. We're really delighted that she's coming back. She actually started the UCLA Entrepreneurs Association. Isn't that telling that she's here at Anderson? So first question, Mattel is one of the world's most loved and renowned brands. This is from Anna Cervantes. Where's Anna? Anna, hello Anna.
Hi, Anna.
What are the key drivers of the brand's sustainable value?
It's a great question, Anna. We spend a lot of time thinking about our brands. In fact, a lot of people call us a toy company, and that's the primary business we're in. But we really focus in on brands. When I talk about the top 10 properties, Barbie, Thomas, Fisher-Price, Hot Wheels, and American Girl, we spend a lot of time on brand building opportunities there, whether it's better advertising, movies. We just had a terrific American Girl movie on over Thanksgiving this year. So we're constantly building brands because those brands really help create the value that people want in those toys. So we spend a lot of time, what I would do, calling more typical consumer products marketing activities. Along with, we have a group of people who are so fabulously talented and creative to come up with the toys to support the brand.
Do you ever say no to certain toy inventions because they don't fit the brand?
We do. There are some things that, for example, on Barbie that might not be consistent with the brand. You know, Barbie is a younger girl brand, sort of the 3 to 6 year old. And there may be some play patterns that are inappropriate. They might be too old or too young for Barbie. But if it's a great toy idea and it doesn't fit with Barbie, well, it might fit with Monster High. It might fit with Polly Pocket. It might fit with American Girl. So because we have a portfolio of brands, we're able to take a look at a lot of different ideas from around the world and try and find a good home for them.
Just picking up on that, you do have a portfolio of dolls.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from American Girl to Monster High to, of course, Barbie. How do you maintain them under the umbrella of Mattel without cannibalizing, without competing, or is that okay?
Well, we spend a lot of time with research and creating insights, and a large part of, if you look at our doll portfolio today, I'll pick on a couple of things. There are 4 really what I call power brands. One is Disney Princess, which we license from Disney. Great brand for us. Barbie, Monster High, and American Girl. Disney Princess tends to be the youngest portion of that particular portfolio, and it really centers around what we would call kind of princess play patterns. And but it's very good. Barbie would be the next brand up in terms of age, and Barbie really lets girls imagine what life could be like in a number of situations or careers. Barbie's, I think, career maybe 130 now. So she's been just about everything, and she'll be more. So we think of, it's a slightly older girl. Monster High is interesting because Monster High is really clearly targeted to an older girl, at least 8 years old, up to about 12. That has been the target, or the part of the market that's probably been the most elusive over the years. But in that one, if you think about the portfolio, we really tapped into an interesting insight. For the girl in that age group, they're beginning to think about what it would be like to be in middle school and high school and all the social drama, social trauma, things that happen to girls there and boys. And so as they think about that, they begin to wonder, and this is their term, not my term, just to be clear, I'm a father of 2 boys and 2 girls, but the girls were using terms like flaws. You know, my hair's too red, my legs are too long, you know, I'm too freckly, whatever it is, and they would view this, how will that impact the group I'm with, what I do, how I'm viewed? And as we thought about how to address this situation, someone like me who's on the business end of toys would have said to someone like Nithya, who's here from the Barbie group, hey, why don't we come up with a feel good about yourself doll? Well, if we had done that, we probably would have sold about 3 dolls. It's not really inspiring, and it's not fun. And so our creative group really thought about monsters as the ultimate personification of a flaw, right? Frankenstein is made of body parts. And so they came up with the idea of kids who are the sons and daughters of famous monsters. So they made fun of the flaws, and the stories all revolve around how these flaws solve a problem. So that's a very different positioning for the brand. It's an older girl, and it's a very, very different thing. It's been hugely successful. In 3 years, it's now the size of American Girl, which is huge. American Girl is about a $500 million business. And American Girl is probably one of the great consumer franchises in the world. The relationship between that 8 and 12-year-old girl and that brand is incredible. It is mom and grandma approved doll play. Grandmas and moms love for girls to play with it. They have to have love with it because the doll's about $105 without tax. But there's just so much richness in what the brand stands for. It's really about girl empowerment and girls understanding, you know, what it's like to be a girl and what they can do. So we spend a lot of time trying to work through all that so that we minimize the cannibalization and maximize the opportunity to grow.
So talk about, because of course it's very interesting that you have this portfolio approach where there might be overlapping categories. How do you engage in process innovation? Is it separate by the business line? What's centralized, what's decentralized in terms of process innovation, marketing, sales?
Sure. I would say we really think of processes and innovation in a few different areas. I'll start first with design, and the key insight for successful design is a consumer insight. In its simplest terms, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And that's what I described the Monster High situation. It's very easy to understand that. Probably at least half the room has gone through that. So we start with that, and then that leads to that. Now, what we are doing, which is quite interesting, is we have an open innovation process where we'll put out some sort of thing that we're not doing today, and we ask for people all over Mattel to submit ideas. The last one we did, we had 160 submissions from every single campus here in the U.S., Hong Kong, one of our plants in China, and it was fantastic because we were able to look at all these ideas, and we actually put one on the market this past Christmas. So we're trying to encourage people to step out of their domain. If I'm a great Barbie designer, that doesn't mean I can't create a great Hot Wheel. And so we got some incredibly talented people. So in the world of creativity, that's one way. In the world of operations, we spend a lot of time on process improvement, primarily because, as you all know, we're in a very volatile environment today from a manufacturing standpoint. Labor costs are going up in Asia. We've had oil prices go up and down and up and down, and who knows where they're going. Packaging costs are increasing every single year. So we've been in a very inflationary time period. Historically, toys have not really been a place where you've seen a lot of automation in the factories. If you look at a doll factory today versus a doll factory 10 years ago, there's automation that we would never have even dreamed about. So we spend a lot of time there. And then the third bucket, I would say, is in the, I'll call it the thinking process area. And I like to think of innovation, whether it's a new and innovative way to streamline how we close the quarters, if it's new, innovative way in how we think about doing research. We let people really think about how can we do things better. One of my personal mantras, and my wife is not that thrilled about this, but it's me, is to be happy and never satisfied. And that, I think, is one of the things that help drives us to improving our processes.
So you talked about Angry Birds and actually going the reverse direction and creating a plastic toy out of it. So much of play for Mattel was very much hands-on and real, tangible. And now so much has shifted to the virtual space. How is Mattel dealing with that in terms of product transfer and then marketing and sales.
Sure. Digital, everybody loves to talk about digital. And we have I'd say an evolving point of view on it simply because that space changes so quickly. And we really think about it in three ways. Number one, digital is a way for us to engage with consumers. Two, it's a way for us to amplify play patterns. And three, it's a great opportunity to find new intellectual property. And so I'll start first with how we engage with consumers. Digital is a means, not an end. And what I mean by that is digital is what drives websites, it drives games, it drives Twitter, it drives everything. It is a thing. It's a process. It's not an ultimate end. It's what lets us do games. So we spend a lot of time, particularly with our brands, making sure we have advertising that works digitally because all the networks are now digital. We have to think about content. One of the ways we launched Monster High, we didn't really advertise it. We launched it with 2- and 3-minute webisodes that a girl could go to the monsterhigh.com website and find out about the story. That was revolutionary for the toy industry. So we think about that. We work hard to get the right kind of game content that's age appropriate and brand appropriate on there. Barbie Twitters, Barbie Facebooks. Nithy can probably tell the other 18 digital things that Barbie does. But we spend a lot of time using digital as a way to engage. When we think about the actual play pattern, it's also quite interesting because there's a couple of things going on. One, if you think about, and we'll pick on Angry Birds. Angry Birds is a solitary thing. You can do it on an airplane, you can do it in your dorm room, you can do it during class, you can do it whenever you want to. But it's a solitary thing. It's not really social. Most of what play is about is social. It's boys getting together to talk about who's got the fastest Hot Wheel. It's girls getting together to talk about a Barbie story they want to tell. So we view it as less social and more solitary. It also tends to be, rather than story building, it tends to be something where you're scoring points. It's very skill specific. So it's a very important part of play, but it's not one of those things that we view as taking over play. What we are doing is we are embracing, when I talk about photo fashion Barbie, that's digital technology. That's taking a camera that probably would have cost $10,000 8 years ago and being able to use that kind of technology to blend those play patterns. So we think about digital not just as an iPad or an iPhone or a Droid or whatever. That's nice, but it's not the end all. It's the brand, it's the play pattern, and it's how you engage. And then the third piece that we think about digital is intellectual property, and that's where Rovio came out. It is an app. You can call it whatever you want in the digital world. It's a great brand. It's a huge brand. You can buy Rovio sheets, Rovio towels, Rovio shoes, Rovio backpacks, Rovio game. It's a huge brand. And we were the first to really capture that. And there'll be some other brand out there that's another Angry Bird someday, and we'll hope to partner with that. It's very dynamic. It's not as simple as, let's get into the app business. We do apps to support our brands. So it's a means, not the end.
It will be interesting to extrapolate out and to ask you the same question 10 years out, whether kids that are growing up today who are born carrying an iPad will in fact still view virtual games as solitary.
It may change. What we know about digital is that everything changes. That's the way it is today, and that's why I say it's always evolving. You know, the other interesting thing, one of the reasons we love basically the pass-down effect of iPads and iPhones and everything else, we view that as very positive. And the reason we do is that there's more touch points for consumers to engage with the brand. The more secondhand iPhones that are in the hands of 5-year-olds lets them get on and look at Barbie and Hot Wheels and everything else. So yeah, we view it as positive. We're not fighting it. We're embracing it. We're trying to figure out how does it work in the toy? How does it work in the brand? How do we deal with the app side of it? So it's exciting, but what I do know is we can probably get together in 2 years.
Probably.
And it'll be very
That's
different
right.
than it is today.
You know, toys are so gender specific, and advertising is very gender specific. And some criticize the toy industry and toy marketing as amplifying the sex role stereotypes and preparing a foundation that is not neutral for girls and boys. How do you respond to that?
Sure. Well, I start with Mattel, we're fortunate to have a portfolio of brands that represent a whole number of things. If you start with the very first brand that people get experience with Mattel with is with Fisher-Price. And so people are buying Fisher-Price feeding seats and teething rings and infant and baby toys. Those are all gender neutral. It's called the infant preschool business, and it doesn't matter if you're a girl or a boy, you buy Fisher-Price things. The games business, if you look at the family games business, so for example, we own the rights to Scrabble outside the U.S. That's a big family game. A lot of the kids' games that we have, for example, like Tumbling Monkeys, that's really kind of a family game. It lets the mother and father play with their son or daughter in a game. So we had things like that. We also know for a fact that there are boys that play with Barbies and there are girls that play with Hot Wheels, just as an example. That happens, but the reality is, and I can tell you, I was one when I came into the company 12 years ago. I looked at our organization structure. I said, we're in big trouble. We have an infant preschool group, we have a boys group, and a girls group. Oh my goodness, the NGOs are going to come after us. What are we doing? Well, what you learn when you study what boys and girls do is, and this is even before they get any stimulus, there are certain patterns of behavior that boys have and certain patterns of behavior that girls have. That doesn't mean they can't intersect, but it is one of those things that as you look at what they truly do, it's in the genes. So we try to market the best we can, but we know that there are boys that play with dolls and girls that play with cars, and that's great.
So I'm going to ask 3 more quick questions. So please line up and be prepared with yours. And I might ask Bryan to give 3 quick answers.
Okay.
First of all, you were head of international. How generalizable are the toys developed here to marketing and play patterns in other countries?
You know, what's interesting, when we talk about kids around the world, they are more similar than they are different. And you see that, for example, an item like Photo Fashion Barbie. That was a huge success, not just in North America, but really globally, everywhere where we sold it. It's a toy that really kind of transcends things. We have challenges in some categories in international. So, for example, in Latin America, it's a great market for us. It's about $1 billion. But if you look at the infant preschool business there, it's not very well developed. Moms there did not grow up with Fisher-Price toys or any other preschool toy. And so we're having to train moms why playing with toys is good for the development of their child and that Fisher-Price is the best brand. So we have to look at category development. It's different for certain reasons. We look at brand development. That's different. But in the end, a Hot Wheel is a Hot Wheel, whether you're French, Brazilian, Chinese, or American. A Barbie is a Barbie. And yes, we sell more blonde Barbies in every country around the world. I'll answer that one right now. Everyone asked, do you sell more Asian Barbies in Asia? No. She's blonde. She's from Malibu, California.
Wow.
You can buy her in any color you want, but that's what we sell the most of.
The succession planning and execution process at Mattel seemed flawless. You were there on the inside. Talk about that, the transition from Bob Eckert to you, how you were prepared for it, and how you asserted yourself once you transitioned from COO to CEO.
Well, I'm glad it appeared flawless to the outside. That's great. I will tell you it was essentially flawless on the inside. I really attribute it to 2 things. As a company, we spend a lot of time on succession planning. Of all the things that we do in human resources, I view that as the most important process that we go through because it forces us to talk about how people's performance is progressing. It forces us to talk about what are the development opportunities that we need to give person A, person B, person C for them to become a success at Mattel. And it forces us to think about, well, if so-and-so wins the lottery and they leave, what will we do? Because nobody ever leaves on your schedule, they leave on their schedule. And so it really forces us to think hard about succession planning, and we do it at all levels in the company, all over the world, in all functions. So I think it's a very disciplined succession plan. The second thing is individual, and I would tell you that's Bob Eckert. I've known Bob for over 25 years, and he is one of the finest executives you can ever work for or be around. Bob really led this, and I tell this is a true quote. When I became COO 2 years ago, I said, Bob, how do you want to make this work? And he said, it's simple. Your job is to run the company. My job is to play golf. That's a quote. And that is literally the attitude. His golf game has gotten a lot better. But he was so wonderful because there are lots of stories about really ugly CEO transitions. This is not one of them. And he respected my need to be different. In fact, I'll tell you, as a part of the whole transition process, one of the other great things he said to me is, you can't be Bob Jr. And that was very powerful. Because what he was trying to tell me is, I need to set my own course. I need to set my own plan. He had a great 12-year run. Bryan, it's up to you. So it's both the process and the individual.
My last question. You have been wonderful in attracting and hiring MBA talent from Anderson. What is it that you look for in MBA talent? Who do you think are going to be the leaders for the 21st century?
It's a great question. The first thing we look for is Anderson grads.
Good answer.
Now, I think there's a couple of things. One, we love to see people who have different experiences, and I know that's a whole part of the process. You graduate from an undergrad, you work, maybe 1 or 2 jobs, and get your MBA. That's really important, and when I look back at my career, it was the diversity of experiences that I got that really helped me to get to where I am. So I look for diversity of experiences, or at least the desire to have some diverse experiences. That's one. Two, there's 2 questions I ask in every single interview. One is, I always ask you, tell me about one of your great leadership moments. And it doesn't have to be business. It could be in your personal life. It could be with your family. It could be at work. It could be in a class. Everybody's had a moment where you've had to do something bold and challenging as a leader. And if you can articulate that as to how you were thinking and how you made your decision, that's important. The other piece I always ask is creativity. And we always say we love creativity, except in our accountants. But that to me is also very important because no matter what function you're in, you have an opportunity to be creative. And if you are an accountant and you tell me how you came up with a more creative way to, again, close the quarter, that's great. So I like to look for people who are willing to sort of challenge, work within the system still, but challenge and push things to get better.
I'm going to ask you to be very quick in your questions and just introduce yourself and then ask the question. Go ahead, in the front.
I was getting nervous because I thought we were having a sit-in demonstration.
Hi, Ronnie C. Wright. My area is neuroeconomics, and thanks, your words certainly illuminated my mind. I'd like to talk about first things first as it relates to the 60-year-old model that was structured and in process. What was the first policy that you put in place when you became CEO?
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you. I would say the first major thing was this whole reorganization to create this North American division and then the global brand teams. As I mentioned in my remarks, it was somewhat controversial. A lot of people didn't understand why we would want to change how we ran the U.S. But it's one of those, it's the old Freddy the Frog story that, you know, if you put Freddy the Frog in water and you gradually bring it up to a boil, he won't jump out. But if you just throw him in boiling water, he'll jump out. It's a Freddy the Frog. I came from international. I didn't have any biases about the U.S. business other than I knew we weren't executing it as well as we should. And so I believe we need to make a change, and that was the first and perhaps most controversial decision I made. The second would be bringing in the Frenchman. And it's been great. It was risky, but it was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Stockton. My name is Jeremy Watson. I'm a second year in the FEMBA program here. First, thank you very much for coming. And second, regarding social media, I'm curious, since most of your customers or consumers are so young, whether you use social media more to observe trends and pick up from them, or whether you're actively engaged in conversation with them at that age.
Yeah, it's a great question because when you look at a brand like Fisher-Price, which is really a mom brand, not a kid brand, there we use social media quite a bit to communicate directly with moms and get moms to share experiences. So I'd say on that brand, it probably looks like most other consumer products brands in terms of how we approach it and how we try to use it. With kids, you have to be very careful because there's all sorts of issues and regulations about how you communicate with kids. Kids just can't go buy something online. So we try to make sure that we're doing things that are age appropriate, gender appropriate, all those things as we use social media. We always run into some issues where somebody tries to take over a site and things like that, but We think it's got a big future for us. What we see happening is we see some of our advertising dollars leaving traditional network television and going to social media. And when I talk about social media, I'm not going to talk about not just the Twitters and the Facebooks, but just being on a website. There is so much content, so much advertising being consumed on websites. Again, I go to Monster High. We barely spent any money on traditional advertising. It was all on the web. So we like to think about what's the content, what's the consumer, and how do we best reach them. For Monster High, older girls are online looking for content. We went online. For a mom, she's probably online talking to her peer group about raising kids.
And what
For
about
Barbie
the
and Hot Wheels, it's TV.
And what about the grandparents? How do you reach them?
Grandparents is going to be primarily social and websites, and we're working very hard with that. As a grandparent, I've got an inside track on the toy industry, both through me and my wife. But I know grandparents are very, very important because they're the ones that, as I love to do, spoil the kids.
Right. Thank you. I'll go back and then I'll come.
Thank you for coming in. I'm Aspen Damobed, second-year student in the full-time program.
Hi there.
As a trend, I'd love to hear about some of the challenges you face when switching from craft to Mattel, like from the food industry to the toy industry. And it would be great to learn about some of the leadership or business skills you gained along the way that helped you traverse some of those challenges.
Thank you.
Great question. I am convinced, having worked in multiple divisions and multiple companies, that every organization has this natural tendency to defend itself. So when I was at Kraft, we sold food. Oscar Mayer hot dog, Kraft singles, Miracle Whip, Maxwell House coffee, Kool-Aid, you name it. And I always used to think it was so hilarious when you would move from the meat division to the coffee division. The coffee people would say, hey, look, you don't get it. This is the coffee business. It's not the meat business. I mean, I know you're in the meat business for 15 years, but you don't know anything about coffee. And so it's a natural defense measure. You know, hey, this is tough. You can't make it here. And the reality, you start going through the logic, do you buy commodities? Yeah, we buy coffee beans. Oh, well, we bought meat. You know, do you have plants that convert this stuff? Oh, yeah, but they're coffee plants. Okay, well, meat does the same thing. So you go through all this, and you realize they're not really that different, but everybody's natural tendency is, oh, you can't get it. So imagine going from food to toy, and the toy people would say, and I always kind of giggle, because not only was I a food guy, I had a second strike against me, which I was one of Bob's guys. And so, you know, Bob was the first outsider, so he got a little bit suspicious of the outside guy, and he brought in a couple of his cronies, right? So, Brian, you're never going to get the toy business because it's really seasonal. How seasonal is it? Well, you know, about 60% of the sales are in November and December. Oh. So is that kind of like cream cheese where 65% of sales are between Thanksgiving and Christmas? Well, yeah, it's different, but it might be a little bit like that. A little bit like that, you know. Okay. You know, and this is all about kids. You know, you're never going to get it. You know, we do a lot of advertising to kids for Kool-Aid. Would it be anything like that? Like Saturday morning TV? Well, yeah, but it's a lot different. So you have these things, and literally I was called the food guy for I don't know how long. And I think maybe around, my wife would remember, I think it was around my 10th anniversary at the company, I think they took the food guy cape off and put toy guy on. So it's just one of these things about organizations and their cultures, it's hard. But so everybody goes through that, and you all will go through that. I don't care if you go from one tech company to another, you don't get it. You know, this is not Groupon, this is Google. It's very different. But in terms of the leadership skills, you know, I would say the skills I've developed have come by seeing different situations. It's not really been brand driven or location driven. It's really different situations. And if you think about what you're learning as you progress throughout your careers, you're going to continue to learn. You know, you get paid for it instead of paying the dean for it. You get paid for it. But it's something that it's true.
I don't keep the money. I wish.
But it's one of those things. It's one of those things that you have to learn how to take your experiences and move them across, because you're dealing with people all the time.
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. Unfortunately, the faculty, we cannot incur their wrath. So we have one more question. It's going to be in the front. And please I report to the faculty, so we want to keep them happy. You can't be late for class.
We'll be in the parking lot about 1:30.
Right.
My name is Danny Green. I'm a second year in the full-time program here. You talked about product innovation really coming a lot from market research, understanding the kid consumers. I'm curious to know if you could respond a little to the opportunity or responsibility of education for our toys as it relates to creating all these products for children.
Toys is an educational
Yeah,
tool.
if there's a specific brand that you feel like does it really well, or kind of in general.
It's a great question. It depends on what you mean by really well. I'm old-fashioned. Doing really well means something's making money and is cash flow positive. The old school marketing guy in me would say, oh gosh, if you've got a big share, you're doing well. Well, shareholders don't care about that. There are one or two brands in the toy industry that I think have positioned themselves very well as sort of learning brands, and they have a great relationship with moms. So they kind of pass the marketing hurdle, but they don't really pass the cash flow and do they make money hurdle. And it's really been a challenge because software is very expensive to develop because it's a narrow market. It's not a big market like Windows for Business, for example. Then you have to translate that into I don't know how many different languages. That's very expensive for a niche. And then the hardware is quite expensive. So as we look at education, Fisher-Price is all about education and child development. You know, we're less worried about the hardware and we're more focused on how do we use the digital space as a way to help moms understand how to raise kids. What should their kids be able to do at 18 months or 12 months? So we're viewing it more as I'll call it a soft play as opposed to a hard play.
Well, I want to thank Bryan. This is a big gift. It's related to wine, so I know he needs that. But I mean, this is a very, very complex organization, not just globally far-flung, but a huge risk factor, as you talked about in 2007. You make it look easy. Thank you for the leadership wisdom and really the insights into this very complicated business that's going through a lot of transformation. And thank you for your friendship to the school. We really appreciate and admire the relationship with Mattel.
Thank you for having me, and we're one of the great places to work.